Get started. Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to this online event hosted by RSCM Queensland. My name is Ashley, and I'll be your host this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you're here as a student, educator, performer, or you're just curious about church music. We are so glad to have you. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting, wherever you're joining us from tonight, and I pay my respect to elders past and present. I would personally like to acknowledge the Jarwin, Daggerman, and Waterman people of the Katherine region, where I'm zooming in from tonight. Across so many denominations, Australian churches are all on their own reconciliation journeys and all working alongside our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters in respect and understanding. And as the musicians that we understand how music brings people together, how music tells stories, and how music holds knowledge. And that has been ongoing in Australian society for tens of thousands of years. Before we get started with our proceedings for tonight, if you have not been to an event with RSCM, I'll just give a little spiel about what we do, a little bit of context for our organisation. So if you haven't heard of us, the Royal School of Church Music is a global organisation. So it operates across mainly in the UK, but also Canada, the US, New Zealand, of course in Australia, around 8,000 members across the globe. Our aim is to generally support the flourishing of church music at all levels, which we do by what we call our 3 E's. So our first E is experience. So we offer a wide variety of musical experiences. We run festivals, mass singing events. We have in Australia our National Youth Chamber Choir, and just aiming to give a bunch of musical experiences that people might not have otherwise been able to access or be a part of. Our second E is education. So we provide lots of courses, certifications, publications, all to support general education in music and in church music and providing resources to people who are working in that space. And our third E is encouragement. So we provide a network for musicians to collaborate and share knowledge. So that's a little bit about RSCM and what we do. So this particular event is organised by RSCM Queensland. So in Australia, we have several state branches. So if you are based in Queensland and something in our discussion tonight really sparks an interest for you, please reach out to us at RSCM Queensland, and we are most happy to have a chat with you and explore some pathways. So yeah, thank you. And let's get started. So our event tonight is all about exploring what it means to be a church musician, what it's like to operate in this space in so many different capacities. It can look like so many different things. And so many of us train as musicians without even considering church music as a professional or a semi-professional option. But in reality, it's an area full of opportunities, conducting, singing, composing, educating, and leading others through music. It is an artistically rich, community-focused experience, and for many is also deeply meaningful and spiritual. So, our panel tonight is a group of extremely talented musicians who work across performance, education, composition, and so much more. Some of them started in the church at a young age, some later in life, and now work in various roles across sacred and secular music. So before we get started with our questions, I would encourage all of our audience members to use the chat function to pop up any questions that might come to you during our discussion. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, and just let us know if you have any questions. We'll have some time allocated for that. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our panelists, Joe Twist, Sam Mitchell, Dom Fitzgerald, and Alex Bartetsko. Welcome to the panel. Thank you guys so much for being here. I will just kick off with some brief introductions if you don't mind. Just briefly introduce yourself, give us a little summary about your musical background and your career, whether that's in a liturgical or a non-liturgical context. We might kick off with Joe.
Oh, okay. Hi everyone. Yeah, I do all sorts of things. And one of them that I love the most is church music. I do, and I guess a big part of what I do is choral music in particular, which obviously, it's very much wedded into the fabric of the church. But I also write film music and TV music. I work on a TV show called Bluey that you might have heard of or seen. So I do that, and then randomly I'm writing a choral piece. And then I'm back to another kids' TV show I work on, and then I'm writing another choral piece, and then I'm singing in a concert with a choir, and then I'm working with a children's choir. So yeah, I do all sorts of different things, and I love to tell stories through music, and doing it liturgically or not is one way of doing that. And yeah, that's kind of me in a quick little bite.
Perfect, Joe. Thank you so much. Sam, we'll throw over to you next.
Evening, everyone. Tuning in from Oxford at the moment, where I've been living for this is my 10th year in Oxford, which I kind of can't believe. Yeah, quick little tour of my musical life so far. So I studied piano at university at the University of Queensland, did my bachelor's and master's there. But I was also kind of singing alongside as sort of a um, not much more than a side hobby. But then I realized I was on the wrong voice type when I kind of jumped up in register. Singing kind of became much more important. And then in 2016, came over to the UK to do a choral scholarship at Gloucester Cathedral, and then got a job at Christ Church Cathedral in Oxford, where I was a lay clerk there for 6 years. And then in 2022, kind of became more freelance. So my main work has been with Ex Cathedra, based in Birmingham, and the Mornsdale Camel Corps in Copenhagen. Um, and then smatterings of work with other kind of concert groups. I'm still deputizing a lot, so deputing quite a lot at Christchurch, also quite a bit at Windsor. And then on the piano front, so still working accompanist, recitalist, teaching piano in a couple of really great schools. Just started to do a bit of teaching at the Junior Royal Academy in London. Working as an accompanist for Oxford University, and been doing some audition accompanying for LSO. And I've just been appointed an examiner for the ABRSM, so the Associated Board of the Royal School of Music, so the sort of Amy B equivalent over here. So that's me.
Sorry, technical difficulties. 1 second. Thank you so much, Sam. We will hop over to Alex. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I'm in my first year of a Master's of Music Therapy after doing a dual Bachelor of Music and Science at UQ. Like Sam in piano, actually. I remember him coming back to UQ in my first year in 2019 and standing next to me in choir and singing alto and going, oh wow. But that choir that I was a part of actually turned into an opportunity to sing at St. John's Cathedral with Dr. Graham Morton. And so I've been doing that for the last 6 years, and that spun off into a lot of opportunities, including when I went overseas on exchange singing with Manchester Cathedral, as well as a couple other choirs, barbershop, and a lot of folk music as well. But at the moment, in other than continuing to sing with choirs and doing my masters, I teach a fair amount of students, a couple connected through the cathedral, and work as an allied health assistant doing sessions with a music therapist who supervises me.
Thanks, Alex. That was wonderful. And Dom, last but not least.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Dominic Fitzgerald, and it's very nice to be here this evening to speak with you all and to be a part of this. I do quite a lot of things. My big day job is I look after the classroom music program at Brisbane Boys College, which I've done now for well, I've taught at the school. I'm in my 10th year at the school, and I've been in that particular role for 4 years. I sang at St John's Cathedral also from 2015 until 2023. In 2023, I left the cathedral to become the director of music at Holy Trinity Parish down the road in Fortitude Valley, which has been a fantastic new development in my life over the last 2 years to really grow that program and expand on what they do there, and that's been really wonderful. My life, though, in music actually began there with me playing the cello at a sort of fairly serious level. But in 2015, and I'm sure this sort of stuff will come up as a question later as to how we fall into these things. That name that's going to come up a bit, Dr. Graham Morton, got his fingers into me, and the singing thing sort of took a hold in my life, and the church music thing with it, and it's been an absolutely wonderful decade that's followed, which I've been very grateful for. So that's me and what I do.
Wonderful. Thank you. So our first question is indeed, how did you first end up in church music? And perhaps how is that different to how church music is a part of your life today? So we might jump straight back to Dom. So you've already spoken about your work at St. John's and at Holy Trinity as well. Yeah, how is your life in church music different now to when you first started?
To when I first started in church music. Yeah, look, it's very different now to when I first started. When I first started in 2015, I was doing an education course at the University of Queensland, and I was in Graham's class and for choral conducting, and I'd had nothing ever to do with singing, or really the only thing I'd really ever had to do with singing was sitting in the cello section and in opera productions and things, and the singers would finally come in for the Sitzprobe or whatever, and whatever. That was as close as I ever got to that whole world. And he invited me to come and join the cathedral choir, and I thought I'd have a go. And this was a sort of, for a while, I suppose, a sort of foot in and a foot out sort of thing, which ultimately very much became 2 feet in, which very much became my full self in. And as the years developed, this became a really, really important part of my identity. Going though from a position of participation in church music in 2015 to 2020, in the last few years of my lay clerkship at St John's, I suppose I took a much more sort of leadership-ish sort of role within the ranks of the lay clerks. And I was also growing a bit older, and that's not a bad thing. And then taking on a full directorship has been a really, really good thing, and to have your hands a bit more on the wheel of where the city is going with these things. And also in the tying my life, I also work at the University of Queensland, by the way. That's sort of the third thing that I do. The Trinity job has really helped to tie the three things together, in that it gives opportunities to students to engage in music at a level beyond school more regularly. And also, I suppose, going along with all of that, and I won't open this up enormously, but one's own spirituality can't help but sort of be a little bit broad and deep and extended, become more nuanced, more granular, all of that sort of stuff. That journey carries through as well. So going from participation to leadership is probably the core of that.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Dom. Sam, how about yourself? How did you first start in church music, and how is that different to what you do today?
Well, there's that name again, Graham Morton. So I was singing at St. Peter's, which is where I went to school, and kind of got the singing bug there. And I remember the European tour that I did. It was just such an inspiring time to be singing amazing music in incredible spaces. And then I when I left school, was singing in the Lucian Singers in St Lucia, and then St John's, and then the St Stephen Scholar. I remember doing the RSCM summer schools, particularly one in 2009. Really enjoyed um, working with Tony Funk, and then got to meet former heads of RSCM, so Lindsay Gray and Andrew Reid. I remember having really, really helpful conversations with those two. Um, yeah, and then as singing kind of became more important professionally, that's when I decided to take the plunge, headed over to Gloucester, and just had a really fulfilling time as a lay clerk in Oxford for those 6 years. But I guess how it's changed now that I'm kind of on the more sort of freelance end of this of the spectrum, um, not sort of doing the daily, uh, you know, 8 services a week, 6 days a week kind of routine, which was so valued at the time. But it is nice to just to have a little bit more autonomy over my time. But it is on the kind of more prosaic end of the spectrum. I really valued the secure employment of being a lay clerk, especially during COVID. That was so valued. We were very well looked after. I'm really grateful for that. But I also come to appreciate the cathedral setting as such a good educational environment as well. So at one of my schools, which is Radley College, I've been working with the trebles in the chapel choir, training up the probationers, and I think it's such a valuable education experience and unbelievable music education that these kids are open to.
Yep, I'm seeing a lot of nods. Definitely, that's a huge nod for myself as well. The incredible educational opportunities across church music has been hugely significant historically and still is today, absolutely. And Joe, how did you first get involved in church music and how is it different to what you do today?
Well, I'm also going to mention the name Graham Morton, of course, and his dear, wonderful brother Ralph Morton too. I sang with him as well. I mean, I grew up on the Gold Coast in a very footy playing state school, and then found myself studying piano at UQ. Um, and it was, I guess, just all the choral music happening in Brisbane when I moved, moved to Brisbane from the Gold Coast. And the fact that I'm a tenor and, I sort of discovered more and more that I'm a tenor and that, then I sort of got better at sight reading and like not just seeing and discovering music, but just the opportunity to write um, is we were talking about this a little bit before we started the way that choral music and in the church or out of the church just lend it there's an appetite for something new. I mean, particularly in Brisbane, where we have like the Australian Voices and so many other great choirs, and it goes back to Graham again, who was the original conductor of Australian Voices. There's so much appetite for that and a great culture for that, but it connects very much to church music too. And just to I realized in my first response too, I didn't really talk about kind of where I ended up and where I've also sung, by the way. But so that's sort of, I went to UQ and then I joined the Brisbane Chamber Choir, which Graham was conducting, and I did a good 7 years there. Learned lots of music and wrote lots of pieces. I sang in a bunch of services and stuff, and I also sang with the Lucians while I was here for a little bit. And then I moved to Sydney and I studied film music because, as you can tell, I've always wanted to do film music as well. But they do kind of connect in some ways. I still think of it all as musical storytelling. But I sang at St James for I think through maybe at least 2 years, maybe longer. And I wrote a lot of music there as well. Warren Trevelyan Jones really encouraged me to write great stuff and had great singers there. But then I finally got this scholarship to go to America that I applied for like 8 times or something. Keep persevering is the lesson there. And it took me to America, where I always really wanted to have a go. And it was supposed to take me to Los Angeles to the University of Southern California, which has a very esteemed film scoring degree. But it actually went to NYU, and that's sort of there's reasons for that. They're not really important now. But so I lived in New York, and I sang at least in one group that was sort of a bunch of early music nerds doing a concert in a church down the road in the Upper West Side. That was cool. But I kind of took a bit of a hiatus. Then when I moved to LA after all that, I was like, okay, great. I'm in Eric Whitacre land, I'm in Morton Lauridsen land, and I'm also in Hans Zimmer, John Williams, Alan Silvestri, Nicholas Breitel, whatever, land. Um, I'm in film music and I'm in choral music land. This is fabulous. And I joined a church choir because, that's the other, apart from just meeting musicians and finding opportunities, it's about friends as well. And this really helped that because I didn't really know many people in LA. And I joined this fabulous Episcopal church, St. James in the city, as they're kind of one of their names, but it's St. James Episcopal in Koreatown in LA. And they have a fabulous choir, professional gig. Every rehearsal is paid. And a lot of the singers there also are professional singers who are unionized over there. But maybe I'll talk about that a bit more later. But that's kind of, I know the question was like, how did you get into it? But I also just wanted to let you know how I sort of ended up in Los Angeles and sort of juggling film music, church music, choral music all at the same time.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Joe. And Alex, I'm actually going to give you a new question. Similar but slightly different. What is it about church music that drew you in initially? What was it that sort of piqued your interest? And is that different to what sort of keeps you there, or what is your main interest now?
Yeah, that's a good question. At the start, I was just honestly quite blown away by the space at St. John's. This the stone ceiling and the echo that you get there. But when I got invited across, being a pianist who'd been in lots of choirs, I thought my sight reading was okay. And then we got a score and you're performing it a couple days later, and you do that every week. And that turnaround of music was actually quite exciting. And that almost clean slate you have every week to try and create something meaningful really was a great learning opportunity, but something that really kept me there and drew me in. And there was a point just past COVID where myself, Dom, and I believe there might be in this call, Zach, were the whole choir. We were one per section. And so that responsibility for sound and teamwork was amazing. And you are there supporting people's worship. Like you're creating a beautiful environment, but really like your performance is always for others, but even more so is that front of mind that this is like something that you're doing and giving to others. Is that what keeps me there now? Yes, a fair bit. The group, the music, the just all these new exciting things that show up. But it's been 6 years, and a lot of the personal aspects do keep you there. There's a community sense that's brilliant and a great support. Actually, I've become the conducting intern at St. John's, which is another learning opportunity, which is really, really enjoying. And it's fantastic to be mentored by such a big industry professional. But on top of that is how people responded to that. In the congregation, in the clergy, they're so excited, got text messages. It's about the time we see you out front. Even to the point last weekend, when I was conducting, one of the servers had got their phone and tried to sneak around to get a good image of me to learn from. So that's that sense of everybody working towards this beautiful product is so valuable and what keeps me there.
Yeah, wonderful, Alex. That was such a brilliant response. And I think your point, particularly about getting through all of this new repertoire, you pick something new up every week, is something those people on the call who may not have experienced church music or sung in a church choir is something quite distinct and so valuable, especially for young singers. Dom has mentioned that he works with a lot of young singers who are, expanding their musical experience and education, and just that quantity of repertoire that you get through is so different to a performance choir that you're a part of. It's just a whole new game of, sight reading and polishing something in a really condensed time period. So yeah, it's a fascinating thing when you first join and so great for musicianship. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Dom, I might throw it over to you if that's all right. So what is it about church music that really drew you in initially? And what do you think in, maybe some more these less quantifiable characteristics about what keeps you there?
Yeah, there there are so many things. Really, it's a multifaceted. It's a really multifaceted thing. Look, for me, I think the repertoire is pretty important. Um, I'm. It sounds flippant to sort of say it like this, but one does become a bit of a sort of Howells addict and Stanford addict and Palestrina addict, and it's really lovely to have Joe on this call. I just put a shout out to everyone. If you can go and find the Winchester Canticles that Joe wrote recently, that is a really, really extraordinary experience. If you're lucky enough to sing them at some point. Um, but go and find them and listen to them, and Joe has given so much beautiful repertoire, and we have other really wonderful composers. John Rotar, who I work with a lot, is an extraordinary mind. Australia has some fabulous, amazing people who contribute to this, but the big, I work in the Anglican context, and so the sort of Howell, Stanford, Parry, Finzi, Bainton thing is something that goes around a lot. So there's that. The question is about what keeps me in it. I think too, the other thing now is the thing of building community and drawing more people into it. Because if it's something that you believe in, that can have really positive impacts and influence on other people's lives, I think it really is important to try to share that, especially with people who you can sort of see the seed of it is going to be in them, and that it's going to give them, potentially the lift that it's given you. So building community, and trying to offer opportunities to people, and bring people into the thing. I think also the sound. That's the other thing. Like so often on Sunday mornings, when going through the psalm chant, it's you just think like these incredibly simple chords, but gee, that's just such an incredibly exquisite thing. And I'm not one of these people. A lot of people get really into this, like, oh, I just really love simple things, and I don't actually subscribe to that hugely in many spaces. I'm a massive fan of Wagner, and I'm a massive fan of lots of stuff, but this wouldn't be defined as simple, but there is also great. That doesn't mean that there isn't great beauty and perfection in simplicity as well. And in church music, we do get to have it all. We do get the simple, we do get the complex, we do get the transcendent, and then that which is more friendly and maybe everyday and things like that. So yeah, I think the repertoire, the sound, the building. The other thing too is like there's something to be said for moving through the cycles of time and how that can be marked. Like Ascension Day is coming up in a couple of weeks, and it's a classic and a banger. But like Finzi God Has Gone Up is on my mind at the moment because I'm going to do that. And we'll do the Howell's Collegium Regale morning service in the same morning, and that's and you sort of look forward to planning those sorts of things. Trinity Sundays a couple of weeks later, the Kenneth Layton hymn to the Trinity will come out for that. I Saw the Lord of Stainer, like that's coming out for that. Like these are real bangers, but you only sort of get to do them then, and then you have to wait until it comes. But you don't want to do the same stuff the next year because there's other stuff you want to do, and so there's something about looking forward to the cycles of the repertoire as well. So yeah, that's a long answer, but they're some of my thoughts on that. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dom. Sam, I've got a slightly different question for you. How do you think that working in church music is different to working in other settings, and whether this is practically how it differs, or, in terms of these um, community characteristics we've been talking about as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a wonderful working environment. And I think it's developing a bit of a musical hive mind with your colleagues that you get to sing with 6 days a week. And, my time in Christchurch, I did the maths, and I think it was nearly 2,000 services that I did there. And you just kind of become an organic unit together, and just you get to know your colleagues, and they get to know you, and you get to think, oh, that's what they're going to do there, and they did. And just you kind of live and breathe music together, um, and it just makes the process of music making just such a joy when you're working with really close colleagues. And just moments like we were singing at an event in the wonderful Christchurch dining hall, um, used as Hogwarts dining hall, so it's just quite a magical setting. And we just finished mains. There was a bit of a sung number happening before dessert, and we just sort of handed out the music, unrehearsed, got up, and it was just we just kind of breathed together, and it just happened. We knew that the next person was going to be quiet because we gave each other that look, and we just breathed in a certain way. So it's just such a joy to kind of create that amazing environment that can only really come from singing with the same people every day, which is really special. Um, yes. What was the question?
No, that was brilliant. Absolutely perfect. Yeah, it's so hard to describe that feeling,
Hard,
but
hey.
yeah,
Remember what that
so wonderful. Joe, you kind of offer our composer perspective on all of these questions. So, for you, when you're writing for a liturgical setting, how is that different or the same to writing something that's non-liturgical?
Yeah, funnily enough, I've actually had this question in various panels, not about church music specifically, but like, how you kind of put on a different hat for different gigs and stuff. And it's a very difficult question to answer, just to be completely honest with you, because I think the only way I really managed to do it personally, sort of from a composing point of view, is to just not um to not really separate them musically, even though you kind of do. Like, okay, I'll use certain harmonies, styles, orchestrations, voicings, whatever, for different things. I mean, even just the fact that film music is recorded, whereas we usually consider church music as live first. But maybe that even goes to the point. I mean, it's probably an obvious answer, maybe, but you still have to think about um, the liturgical needs, the place of it in a service, um, uh, which is no different in some ways to programming, I guess. But I'm actually not much of a director. I've definitely not had a director position. But we think about the form and the shape of a concert, for example. I'm sure to varying degrees directors do when they program works, and obviously it goes in with the seasons and what have you. But I guess I just yeah, just to be honest with you, it's just a kind of a tough one to answer, but I guess I still think of it as a story, and I still think of it as um expressing something, that is transcendental. And I guess in church music, I tend to zoom out more, perhaps, because I want to convey that this is spiritual and I'm being spiritual now, as opposed to I don't know, writing a music for a horror film, which I've done. Although actually that is kind of spiritual too. Oh, that's weird. See, every now and then you realize there's a connection. But actually, I noticed that Catherine in the chat did ask about Bluey, and it kind of goes to this question, I think, too. That, is there a connection? Like, the answer is, like, at least at first, no, other than just sort of the practical things. Okay, what is the text, and how do I convey it, and how do I construct my musical ideas that work in that way? But I do when it comes to something like Bluey, it's so much more collaborative, and I mean I'm working with other composers. I'm not the composer for Bluey. I'm a composer for Bluey, um, and it's there's a lot of feedback from directors and what have you. Whereas I feel like I'm given a lot more autonomy in church music, really just to express my spirituality, and I really just go to the meaning of the text and use my all the different things that we've all learned as singers, to go back to, what we do here, all the repertoire that's been thrown in front of me. And I've been like, wow, that's really cool. How can I steal that? We do that in all types of music. But it's fabulous to like um, live and breathe it in a ritualistic sense, which we've been talking about as well. Every week, well, okay, here's the old chestnut, here's the old chestnut. Oh my goodness, what is this? Maybe I don't like it, or another one, maybe I do like it, and I think now that's really cool, and I could use that. And I dare suggest that every now and then I might use a little bit of what I learned from Howells in a film score, but probably more often than not, I probably try and force all my film music cliches that I've developed and learned into choral music. But that I think still creates a Joe Twist thing, really, in the end. But I'll do it a bit differently here and there. And even just Australian stuff, like I love Ross Edwards, for example. I try and put a little bit of that in some film music and a little bit. So you kind of all blend it together. But yeah, in the end, it's kind of like I'm telling this story and it's in a film, whereas in this, I know that this story exists in this liturgical position in a service, and so I'll try and write it to reflect that, but I'm still just telling the story in the end musically. So yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you, panelists. We're moving towards a bit more of a practical question, I guess. We have lots of people on this call who may not have experience as a church musician or even necessarily being in church at all. What do you think would be some common misconceptions that you maybe have experienced throughout your career or when you first started in church music, for people who maybe aren't experienced in that setting or don't have a lot of exposure to that? Yeah, what are some maybe misconceptions that people might hold about what it means to work as a church musician or be a church musician, whether that's professionally or non-professionally? I might start with Sam, if that's all right. So yeah, what do you think? What is maybe something that would surprise people about being a church musician, or maybe something that you know now you didn't know at the start?
Yeah, very good question. I think you need to remember that, well, from the lay clerk kind of point of view, where I'm coming from, that it is a job. And sometimes that Friday evening song can be a bit of a slog, and not every service is going to be a gramophone award winner. And uh, and also, the time that you spend with pieces can often be very short as well. I remember kind of coming across a piece that was just on my bucket list. I was, oh yes, finally get to do this. And then we rehearse for 15 minutes and then perform it, and then back in the pigeonhole kind of thing. Um, but in saying that, the special moments are very, very special, which really, really kind of important moments. Uh, you know, surrounding, for example, the Queen's funeral, that type of thing. Kind of being there, being present in, really kind of important global moments, and really exciting opportunities like tours and recordings and broadcasts and that type of thing. Where we sort of step out of the normal routine. That can be very, very special. Yeah, I think a particular annual highlight is the John Passion that we get to do every Holy Week, and everyone just brings their A game, and it's such a special time. So it's those moments where you kind of break the routine, really make it all worth it.
Yeah, beautiful. Um, Alex, anything come to mind for you? Maybe a misconception if you have spoken with other musicians or non-musicians, and they might have certain assumptions about what it means to be a church musician and to go every Sunday for your services. So yeah, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, there's a couple. First of all, is obviously you can participate as a female. That's the first one. I do have to compete with the boy choristers sometimes for the high notes, but there is a place for women in church music, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And that I think that there's something that could be gone into, but creates some really nice moments actually having these other perspectives and voices coming in, and some fun opportunities and moments. We're talking about the Queen's funeral. Before the Jubilee concert, we had a choir come up from Sydney who was an all-male cathedral choir. And so for that one, before some other lovely ladies had joined the alto section, I was the only woman in the concert for the Queen's Jubilee, with about 40 male singers. But they're it's still very welcome. The other one is actually about having to believe in the faith yourself. I was people joke about being a C and E Christian. I was barely even the E part. My family would show up for midnight mass maybe. But it's not, as long as you show up with a willingness to first respect the tradition and process, and an open mind. I think a lot of places that have music want you to contribute to a beauty, and allow you to show up as long as it's respectful in whatever belief you have, and focus on that common goal of creating a musical environment that contributes to that meditation. And I've never felt like any specific thoughts were being forced on me to meditate about. So that's been a very nice, actually, realization for me, and why I felt comfortable to stick around for so long.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I think so many people just come into it assuming every single person in the choir is extremely devout and everyone comes from the same background and they've grown up in the church and, it's their life. And the reality is that people come from so many different backgrounds and different faiths and sort of levels of spirituality. So it's a very diverse and welcoming group. As you've said, Alex, every group that I've been a part of certainly has been absolutely welcoming and accepting. I will just throw to Dom as well for that question as well. Any misconceptions that you've encountered about, people's assumptions around working in a church environment?
No, I think the important thing is that it really is each individual's journey. I sort of don't really want to say much more than that. People carve their own path through this. And to folks who are sort of considering, should I join a choir? Should I go and sit in the pews on a Sunday morning and just hear the music and hear the readings and whatever? Like, I would just say go and do it, because you find your own way through. If there's something that is appealing to you and beautiful to you and attractive to you in the music or in the building or in the people or in the whatever, like, one finds one's own way through it. I think of my own path, and I just absolutely cannot imagine that anyone else would have walked exactly this set of footsteps. And I think we're all probably a bit like that. I think that's a really terrific thing, and two, it's just, that's what I would say, that it's a very individual thing. So don't be concerned that you would be precluded, in other words, because it's so individual.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Tom. And that transitions beautifully to our next question, which is sorry, Joe, did you have something to add there?
Oh, I guess if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind just saying something really short. I'd just like to talk about my experience in America in relation to that a bit, because I presume, and if I'm presume wrong, then fine, but I'm just going to presume that people's usual inclination is to explore opportunities in Australia or the UK or Commonwealth nations, I guess. I mean, I'd love to go to Canada, but America was just a really interesting, and particularly Los Angeles was something really interesting too. I'm sure New York would be different. In fact, my boyfriend, when I was in New York, was a countertenor at Manhattan School of Music, and he is an opera singer who wasn't very good at sight reading. So that was an interesting dynamic because I love sight reading. But a lot of singers there are in Broadway or they're opera singers. So there's that. Then I went to Los Angeles, and a lot of the singers I was with were more choral in their voice types, I guess, in their experience. But they were also professional recording artists, and a lot of them were in a group in particular called LA Master Chorale. I wasn't. I wanted to audition, but didn't get around to that. I was busy doing film music and stuff as well. But it was just a whole interesting, different dynamic to see the sort of, bizarro world of America, which has, similarities. And it's technically an Anglican church I was in too. So it felt familiar in my experience from St. John's or St. James in Sydney. But in terms of music, although there was certain American repertoire that we would do, but just the way that the standard was high in a different way, and it was because people had come through a lot of American institutions who have these great conductors who really study conducting, and then they were unionized the same as the actors are. Like they're literally unionized by I don't know what it stands for, but SAG-AFTRA, which is the famous, like Fran Drescher is the head of that. Um, and and so they're singing church services in various places, and they loved St. James because we all got together and were Anglophiles, and we loved the Anglican repertoire. But we would sing other stuff, and some of them would also go and sing Jewish services for High Holy Days, a whole nother opportunity. And then, of course, sing in recording sessions for film scores. Reason, by the way, why they were considered actors by the union is that even though you're in a choir, your voice is considered your own, even though you're sort of part of that group. But I just wanted to basically, I'll finish now, but just say that it's another opportunity for people to consider. Going to America is difficult, but you can ask me about that, visas and stuff later. But if you can do it, there's a lot of opportunities there. You can actually have a profession there, as not necessarily as a church musician only, but as a singer, and not necessarily a soloist either. And yeah, but the fact that you have church and you make friends, and that who are well, of all different backgrounds and all different experiences. I mean, I was this random Aussie turning up, and a lot of people were from Texas and New York and Oklahoma and wherever. And like that was a melting pot in a way. And I mean, look, and just as one last little random thing to express that too. I mean, you meet your friends, you meet your fellow musicians, you meet your political rivals even randomly. I mean, discussions I had with friends, but it was loving and communal and fabulous. But I got a gig writing for the Los Angeles Philharmonic with Moby, the artist, because the twin brother of a bass happened to be his personal musical assistant. Like it's just like, so if you go to another city, you join a goddamn church choir, and you meet so many wonderful people, and you have fabulous experiences. And the best person to ask now is someone who was singing at St. James. Her name's Alex Seegers, and she's now in St. James, LA as well. She was in Sydney, I mean. So yeah, just go abroad or stay here. I don't know, but join a choir, and you'll meet all sorts of wonderful people and have experiences. So.
I love that. What a beautiful sentiment. Sam, our next question is for you. We're getting towards the end now. What would you say to someone who's maybe sitting in this call, they're curious about this pathway, they're interested in it, but maybe they're just still a little unsure if it's for them? Any piece of advice, or what would you say to that person?
Well, I think how I got into the kind of cathedral singing world was through a choral scholarship, and it was just the best experience. It was so wonderful. A year long, which is a good amount of time to dip your toes in, see if you like it. But it's just such a brilliant picture of what singing in a cathedral full time is. So it's a year long kind of gap year sort of internship. As I say, mine was at Gloucester. Gives you a brilliant snapshot where you're given accommodation, you sing the daily services, you learn so much about you go through the whole church year. You get exposed to so much repertoire. You learn how to sight read. You learn how to pace yourself. I remember I was a little too eager one weekend and sang a bit too much on a cold and had laryngitis for a fortnight. lesson learned, never happened again. But it's those lessons that you learn in that environment, which is really, really crucial. And it's just the best year, whether you decide to kind of pursue it professionally or not. It's just the most wonderful experience. Um, yeah, in particular, my time at Gloucester means that I was involved in the Three Choirs Festival. So Gloucester, Hereford, and Worcester um, come together every summer, and it's just like the musical Olympics. There's an enormous concert every day. So I think during my week, 1 week, we did Mozart Requiem, Berlioz Requiem, Carmina Burana, Donna Novis Pacem by Vaughan Williams. We did Elgar's The Kingdom and finished with Mahler 8. I mean, it's such a rich week of music making. So choral scholarships, I think that they're the business. They're absolutely great.
Brilliant. That's a lovely answer. Thank you so much. Alex, what do you think for someone who's maybe curious? It recently sort of, I feel like you can empathize with this position of a young person maybe looking to experience this part of music or something. What would be your advice to them?
My advice would be that there not only are there so many opportunities that can come out of it, both in and outside the church music world, just by the fact that you're putting yourself in front of a lot of different people, that opportunity there, that there are so many different ways you can engage with it. There are so many different levels of involvement between different groups and settings. There's something that can fit what you're looking for. I believe that's a really big opportunity within church music. There are small local groups. There are cathedrals we've talked about. There's, Sam singing every day almost each week. There's so many levels you can engage in. So there's always an opportunity to go up in intensity or down in intensity as to what suits you. But yeah, that the opportunities that come out of it, like being invited to sing in National Youth Choir of Australia, all of those things are that community building is so valuable. So for whatever amount of time you can become engaged and at what level you can become engaged, I'm sure there'll be many returns. So that's hopefully empowers you to take that first step.
Thanks, Alex. I have one final question for the panel, and I'll hear from each of you if that's all right. We have this overall sentiment or concern about dwindling numbers at church services and things like that, but I would just love to hear something from each of you about where you think church music is really thriving at the moment, or something that really gives you hope for its future. So whether that's an experience that you've had recently, one particular moment where you just feel church music really at its best, or if that's a more general sentiment about how it fits in with our lives. However, it feels best to you to answer this question. Um, Alex, can we throw this one to you first? A tough question, a broad question.
Yeah, hardly a minute to think. Um, I, as much as that's a valid sentiment and concern, I think as a young person who's just entered the space only recently, how passionate I feel about it means that as a young person, with a young person's perspective, there's so much that keeps me engaged, and I hope that rings true for other people. So that gives me hope that it won't dwindle past the point of non-existence. But where it thrives, I think that community formation, that common goal, that opportunity for people to come and meditate together, either by creating music or in the congregation, is so valuable and hard to come by in such a fast-paced world. So I think there will always be space for those kinds of opportunities and a reason to keep music as a part of church settings is that great tool that it is to support that grounding that we need in our modern lives.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Alex. Joe, what comes to mind for you?
Look, I'm probably going to say the obvious thing, but uh, the more we have composers who are living, who aren't male, would be good too. Then the more it will thrive. Is just my overall message. I think the church will always and always has had, and any church this is, it's challenge to meet the people, I guess, to uphold great traditions while realizing that people change and we need to have change. And to me, obviously, the way to do that is to um, continue being malleable. We were talking about this earlier too. Like the reason why I love writing for church and writing for choral music is because you've got people who are there all the time, week after week, doing this ritual in a spiritual and a communal way, as friends, as believers, etc., and as lovers of music. So the more we keep writing, but I just think that we need to find a way to keep the tradition while opening it up. But look, there's so many great churches that are doing that, and one of them happened to randomly be in America, where I didn't expect that kind of thing to happen. So I think the future is actually bright. So enjoy it.
That's so nice to hear. Thank you, Joe. And Dom, how about yourself? Where do you think church music is thriving and where is it heading?
This is probably the attitude of a school teacher, but I always think that things are going like the grass is always greener where you water it. So if we're concerned about dwindling this or all of this sort of stuff, well, I mean, do something about it is important, which is why having discussions like this is really good, and building communities is really really important. I've been incredibly heartened with the progress that we've made at Holy Trinity over the last couple of years, and I fully acknowledge that the work that I do there stands on a really long tradition in that place. But nevertheless, long traditions are not only terrific and great, but they're fundamental. But you also have to further them, and so yeah, I mean it's about going out and spreading the message and recruiting people into groups. And as Joe says, responding and listening to the society that you're in, thinking what is the thing that people need in their lives now? What are gaps that we think that people have in their lives that we can fill? What are gaps in people's lives that they know that they need to have filled? And how can we all sort of work at that together? Yeah, I think it's something that if we believe that it's important, we need to go out and continue to flourish for the furtherment of human dignity and human flourishing.
Beautiful. And Sam, working in the UK must be amazing to see the authentic flourishing of church music. So, from your perspective and what you've been exposed to recently, what are you thinking
Mhm.
about the present and the
No,
future of church music?
I mean, aside from church music, but just church life in general, the sort of fear of it dwindling is actually I've sort of experienced the opposite. I've just been looking at some stats, and Gen Z engagement in the church has quadrupled over the last 6 years. So I'm not worried about the life of the church. I think it's going to be absolutely fine. But in terms of church music, yes, we've faced some difficulties. I think post COVID, noticed particularly kind of the collegiate church music making circles. We've struggled recruiting undergraduates. I think very rightly are protective of their time, and not overcommitting themselves. So that has been a bit of a challenge. And in terms of treble recruiting trebles, we've kind of struggled a bit with that because specifically in Christchurch, which is the cathedral to Oxford, so it seems the cathedral term as opposed to the university term. They need to board, and I think that is a big ask. But one thing that is absolutely flourishing at the moment is the girl chorister scheme, which is just exploding. There's a huge waiting list, and I don't know what the magic ingredient is. I think it's the right commitment level. So they sing one rehearsal and one service a week, but a really high level. And I think, just getting the balance between the amount that you're doing and the quality that you're doing, working at, seems to just be the secret ingredient.
Wonderful. Well, that was my last question. Thank you for such a rich conversation, panelists. This has been just fantastic. We do have a few minutes for Q&A. I've got one question lined up, but if you're in the audience and have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat. Now is the time. We had one question in the chat specifically for Sam, and it was, do you find a significant difference in UK attitude to sacred music as opposed to Australia? Our question asker has said the impression I have is music is far more available to children than here. So generally differences between the UK and Australia. What do you think?
Yes, well, I did spot that question. I've been mulling it over, and of course, grass is always greener. But you can't deny that the centuries of cathedral tradition is just so established in the UK. And I think in the specific world of cathedral music, frankly, yes, there are more opportunities for young singers over here. But absolutely don't look past the amazing opportunities that you have in Australia. And I was very, very proud to host the St. Peter's Chorale when they toured here, and they gave a fantastic performance in Christchurch, and would put a lot of school choirs to shame over here. So don't look past the opportunities that you have in Australia. As I say, you can't deny the fact that there are more cathedral singing opportunities over here, but there's some absolutely brilliant work happening everywhere.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we have been going for just on an hour. So unless anyone has a burning question from the audience, we might take this opportunity to wrap up and give an enormous thank you to our wonderful panelists. So if you're a participant, we would love for you to put a message in the chat or use the react button on your screen to applaud and thank our amazing panelists. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you and everyone in our audience as well. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time, panelists. If anyone is interested in learning more about RSCM Queensland and what we offer, training, resources, networking, if you're interested in joining a church choir, if you're in Queensland, we can certainly connect you with someone in your area. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. The email that you got from me today with this link, you can reach out to us there or find us on Facebook, Instagram, our website as well. We have so many events coming up this year, so please check it out. If you're not on our emailing list, definitely hit that one up because we have some newsletters. We've got new events and things that might be of interest to you. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ashley, for hosting. Bravo. Very nice. Thank you, everyone. Lovely to see you all.